Hey everyone, this is David Brown, and as 2024 comes to a close, I thought this would be a good chance to reflect back on some of the top moments and top birds of the year. So let's jump into it. Let's start in January when easterly winds off of the ocean brought a good flight of dovekies to the shores of downstate Delaware. Dovekies are small alcids, and although they're not rare on the ocean off of Delaware in the winter, it's rare to see them from land. So only when the winds are right did we get a good movement of them that could be seen and photographed from shore, and these were seen in the vicinity of Indian River Inlet. Now let's look at a few days later in upstate Delaware. This is the Newark Reservoir in Newcastle County, and it was a really snowy day, as I'm sure you can tell, and I had been outside shoveling some snow when the report came in that there were a bunch of ducks that had dropped down on the reservoir. I think specifically, maybe we were looking at canvasback. I can't remember if there were redheads, but there were multiple duck species that we wanted to see. So Kim and I jumped in the car. It was a very sketchy drive over. The roads weren't that good. And when we got to the reservoir, the weather was pretty crummy. This photo doesn't do it justice. The wind was howling, and it wasn't rain or snow. It was like icy rain, and we got completely covered in ice. From our clothing to our scopes, everything was a sheet of ice. And to top it all off, the birds had flown away already, so we didn't even get the target species we were looking for. And it was a brutal experience, but it was kind of fun. At least looking back on it now, it seems like a good time. The next top moment of the year brings me to central Pennsylvania in early February. My friend Eric and I went to Arby Winter State Park to see some nesting red crossbills, and some of them were the rare type 4 that is not normally seen in Pennsylvania. My next top moment of the year is riding the ferry between Lewis, Delaware and Cape May, New Jersey. So anyone who lives in the region knows that it's sort of a mini pelagic that you get to do. It's about 16 miles across the mouth of the Delaware Bay, and you have a bit of a chance to see some birds that maybe you wouldn't normally see from shore. We went out on February 20th, and the highlight on the Cape May side was 2 black-headed gulls, and they gave us a terrific look, as you can see here. And then on the way back, we had this Iceland gull following the boat, and it gave us some really, really close looks. So I got fantastic photos. Really cool to see this species. And Kim and I rode the ferry again in July, and we had this shearwater, which is the former Cory's shearwater type. Now, this species has been split into Cory shearwater and the less common Scopely shearwater. I think the verdict is still out on which one this officially is. The difference has to do with the amount of white in the wingtips. So not 100% sure which of the two species this is, but regardless, a really cool species to see in Delaware waters. My next top moment of the year is the Braddock Bay Hawkwatch. I had returned for my 6th season as the counter. It's a 3-month count in the spring, March, April, and May, with the main focus be counting migrating raptors. And over the course of the season, you get somewhere between 50, 60, 70, 80,000 migrating raptors that pass through, but also a lot of world-class birding all along the lakeshore in the area up there near Rochester, New York. And not just the birds, but also the people are so amazing up there. I've made so many great friends from the birding community up there, and there's a lot of people that travel from pretty far away to come visit the Hawkwatch as well. So here you can see in this photo, it was a pretty busy day on the platform. Here's a photo from the Hawkwatch platform on April 19th, 2024. It's me on the left, Kim Steininger in the middle, and Mike Tetlow on the right. And this was after we had just finished counting probably one of the biggest hawk flights of any of our lives. We had a single hour where we had more than 11,000 raptors migrate through. It was just the way that it worked out with the peak of the broad-winged hawk migration and the weather patterns where rain kind of held the flight back in the morning, and then there was like a 1-hour window that the birds were able to move before the cold front hit, and they moved all right. So just a really spectacular volume of migrating raptors that day. So probably one of my best hawk watching memories of all time. Jumping ahead to the summer, my next top moment was getting to participate in the Pennsylvania Breeding Atlas. So here's my brother and I out in the state forest in northern Lycoming County. And getting to participate in the Breeding Atlas, it just really motivates you to get out into places you normally wouldn't go. A lot of times during migration, we stick to sites that are closer to home and where there's a big concentration of migrating birds. But the breeding atlas, you really start looking at the map and trying to cover all the different parts of the county. And you just go to places that no one really covers and you never know what you're going to find. So it's a really fun way to get out there and explore. My next top experience of the year was getting to return to the Ashland Hawkwatch in northern Delaware for my 8th season as counter. And we had a pretty lousy season overall bird-wise. We had almost no broadwings, only 134 total the whole season. And golden eagle numbers were also low with only 4 for the entire season. So the raptors were a little disappointing, but we had a really good time. I have so many friends. We have a really good core group that comes out almost daily. So a lot of fun to be had up at the Ashland Hawkwatch, even when the birding isn't terrific. My next top experience wasn't anything to do with birds, but had to do with the sky. This was a really cool year for different celestial events. Let me start off with the look at auroras that we had up in Rochester in the spring. And here we are once again on the Braddock Bay Hawkwatch platform, but this day, the birds weren't the main focus. This was the day of the total solar eclipse, although as you can see from the photo, it ended up being cloudy, so we didn't really get to see the sun get covered. But we still had a really good time. There was a really good crowd that came out. My family came up. We had some birding friends come up from Delaware. So just a really fun group of people out on the platform. I think everyone had a really good time, and I had seen a total solar eclipse on a clear day, so it was a little bit neat to see it on a cloudy day, although it's a little disappointing to not actually get to see the sun during totality, but it was just really amazing how dark it got. But the way the clouds were, there was a gap on the horizon that some sunshine was lighting the clouds up from underneath, so a really cool experience regardless of the weather not cooperating. And then in the fall, I got to see the auroras again from the Ashland Hawkwatch, and auroras are really rare to see as far south as Delaware, so it was really spectacular to see them this well, and Kim and I and a few others met up at the Ashland Hawkwatch, and I got this really cool photo of me standing behind the Hawkwatch sign with a nice aurora in the background, and it really didn't last that long. It was good for maybe the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then it kind of faded, and then a lot more people showed up, but it was really spectacular for as long as it lasted. And the last celestial event of the year was a nice comet that was in the evening sky for part of the fall. And the last top moment of the year was going up to the Route 15 overlook during the Williamsport Christmas bird count. This was just a few weeks ago, and I decided to go there because the winds were good out of the northwest, and I was rewarded with a total of 7 golden eagles for the Christmas bird count. So really fun to spend a day hawk watching at the place that I sort of learned to hawkwatch in the first place. That's where I built a lot of my early experience. And since I'm always away in the spring and fall now, I don't get much time to hawkwatch up there. So really nice to get a big flight of golden eagles that late in December. And this was the one that gave the closest look. Before we wrap up, let me show a few more birds that are honorable mentions for the year. Here we have a really nice glaucous gull that flew by Battery Park in Delaware. Here's a barnacle goose that was hanging around Smyrna, Delaware last winter and has actually shown up again this winter and is still being seen. My only American goshawk of the year was this one that migrated past Braddock Bay. Here's a summer tanager that a friend and I found while birding a trail after the Braddock Bay Hawkwatch one day. And part of the reason it was so memorable was because Kim wasn't with us, so I texted her that we had found it and she actually drove over and she ran to the spot to try to see it, but we couldn't find it. So we had started to walk back towards the car, and when we were almost back to the cars, someone else that was there texted and said, "Oh, it's showing again." So we had to run back one more time. So Kim was pretty wiped out after that, but it was one of those cool birding experiences where you think you're going to get the bird and you think you're not going to get it, and then you finally do get it. Another honorable mention is Swainson's hawk. Here's a really nice dark morph that migrated over while Kim and I were on the platform. And here's a light morph Swainson's hawk that showed up towards the end of the season and actually stuck around quite a while and gave really nice looks on multiple days. Here's another rare species from Braddock Bay. This is a Mississippi kite, and this one is even rarer because it's an adult. Usually we see immature ones. And we'll finish with 2 more honorable mentions from Delaware. Here's a California gull that showed up on Port Mahon Road over the summer. And here's a lark sparrow from the Cape Henlopen Hawkwatch in early September. And let me finish with the 5 birds that were new lifers for me in 2024. We'll start out with this LeConte sparrow that was in northern Delaware at a place called DEEC, the DuPont Environmental Education Center. And this is a bird that Kim and I went for multiple times, I think at least 3 times. And it was about a mile walk to get to the spot this bird was being seen. And every time we would go, I would get a glimpse of a bird, and I was pretty sure it was this bird, but at that point, it hadn't even really been confirmed that it was a LeConte and not one of the similar looking species. So I really wanted to get a good look at it and photos, since it would be a lifer for me. And finally, I think it was on that 3rd time, me and Kim and 2 other birding friends met up, and right away, without having to use any playback or pish or anything like that, the bird was pretty active and giving us nice looks. And you can see I ended up getting some really nice photos of my lifer, LeConte sparrow. My next lifer takes us back up to Braddock Bay. This was a loggerhead shrike that someone found in some of the farmland off to the west of where Braddock Bay is. So this was a nice bird to run out and get after the hawkwatch one day. And again, a lifer. Much rarer up there than the northern shrikes that you might see during the winter time. This is a species that historically actually had nested up in that region, but over time they disappeared. So really rare bird to get up in Monroe County, New York. My next life bird came while I was on the Braddock Bay Hawkwatch platform, and actually we were looking off to the side because someone had called out, they thought they were seeing some streaming broadwings, and I thought it was a flock of blue jays, so we were looking for the birds to come out to see which they were, and I spotted this bird with a really long tail flying towards us, and I couldn't quite make out what it was at first until the bird flared up, and it was obvious that it was a magpie. This is a black-billed magpie, a very rare bird for New York State with only a handful of state records. And this bird actually stuck around for a little bit and was seen briefly again in the afternoon. So there were a decent number of people who got to see this bird, but it ended up just being a one-day wonder. So who knows where it ended up after that, but really cool bird and a really nice lifer. My next life bird came in the fall down in Delaware, and this was actually a species that I had tried for a few weeks earlier and missed at a different location, and then one showed up in Newcastle County. This is a Bell's Vireo, and this bird took me, I think, again, 3 trips before I finally got to see it. So a little bit tough, but ended up cooperating in the end, giving pretty close looks in good light. And this is one of only a handful of state records of Bell's Vireo for Delaware. My 5th and final life bird of 2024 came just a few weeks ago in December in downstate Delaware, down at Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge. This is a European shorebird called a northern lapwing. There's only a handful of records of northern lapwing for Delaware, and they're just a really cool shorebird. They're quite large, maybe about the same size as a black-bellied plover, and they have a really cool plumage to them, a lot of white underneath and then black in the wings with white wingtips. So really happy to pick this bird up as a life bird. All right, those were my top moments of 2024, and this is a good time of year to sort of reflect back on the past year and see all of the fun adventures that you had, and I'm sure there will be plenty more to come for me in 2025. But I'm curious, let me know in the comments, what was your top moment of 2024, birding or otherwise, and you can include a few if you would like. Everyone have a happy new year and good birding for 2025. From Lyco Birds, this is David Brown. Thanks for watching.